Big Man, wherein Jack Crabb, later played by Dustin Hoffman, and his blind Cheyenne grandfather, Old Lodgeskins, walk unharmed through the whole of Custer's army, even as bullets rain down all around them. Pay no attention to them, my son, Old Lodgeskins tells Jack. I have now seen that it is not our day to die. But why, I wonder, is this the version we remember? Because there is a kind of release in comedy we cannot help to find in Custer's gore? Because the truth about what happened in certain places in the West has a way of making those places uninhabitable to us in an imaginative sense? I don't pretend to have answers to these questions. All I really know is that as I wended my way south that morning, I felt myself spurred on by a single, ludicrously simple wish. And that was to stand at the site of Black Kettle's village, maybe take a snapshot or two to show Rhea when I got back home to Indiana. With the trip meter on the Jeep reading 160 miles, I entered the town of Cheyenne, Oklahoma, population 778. Grain elevators rose on the right side of the road, while on the left side, just off the main square, was the Black Kettle Museum. The valley I'd come to see was located 2 miles west of Cheyenne on State Highway 47A, just below an impressive range of red rock bluffs. Managed by the U.S. Park Service since 1996, the Ouachita site includes a concrete overpass, interpretive plaques, and a winding, mile-long, self-guided tour. Beyond these few embellishments, however, the valley looks pretty much the same as it would have in the 1860s. Leaving the Jeep in the asphalt parking lot, I walked down a hillside of rock and scorched weeds until I came to a broad meadow in a horseshoe of the river. The place was an oasis of sorts, protected from the wind by the bluffs, with plenty of water, wood, and grass nearby. In a land filled with beautiful places, it might not have drawn a second glance. But on the open, high plains, it registered as a kind of paradise. Closing my eyes, I could hear the steady murmur of the river, which was really more like a small creek, and feel the rustle of the wind as it moved through the knee-high grass. A cow bawled for her calf in a nearby pasture. Grasshoppers collided in the grass at my feet. A fly landed on my left ear, took a couple of six-legged steps, and then buzzed away. When I opened my eyes, it was almost as though I could see the outline of the village, the tall white lodges opening to the east and arranged in kinship circles within the river's bend. Terrible things had happened here. Black Kettle, shot from his horse, died and was scalped by Custer's Osage scouts within 100 yards of where I stood. And yet, I did not smell the odor of death nor listen for the sound of gunfire. Instead, I imagined the place at peace. Why? What renegade desire of mine did that express? I spent the next hour roaming the valley's 300 acres, then drove over to the Black Kettle Museum in Cheyenne, where I fell into conversation about Custer with a woman ringing up my purchases in the gift shop. Are you a fan of General Custer's? The woman asked. Not really, I said. Then why all the books? She asked. I told her I was from Kansas and that Custer had spent some time there in the years before the Battle of the Little Bighorn. Kansas, huh? Then I suppose you've been to Pawnee Fork. I've heard of it, I said. At this, she pulled a book from my stack of purchases and opened it to a map of the Hancock campaign of 1867. There, she said, pointing a finger at a spot on the Pawnee Fork of the Arkansas River, halfway between Fort Larned and Fort Dodge. I don't know if the Park Service has opened the site yet, but it might be worth your time to take a look, she said. I stood there laughing and shaking my head. What's so funny? The woman asked. Nothing, I said. It's just that I've driven 700 miles over the last 2 days. And the spot you're pointing to is about 40 miles from where I grew up. Well, there you go, the woman said, shutting the book with a thud. Part 3, Pawnee Fork. It was the spring of 1867, a year and a half before the Battle of Washita, and the Army was having all manner of trouble with the Indians on the northern and southern plains. The previous winter, Red Cloud Sioux had annihilated the entire Fetterman Army in the Wyoming Territory. And now, rumor had it that the Kiowa chief Satanta had boasted to the officers at Fort Dodge that he would run the army out of Kansas come spring. To forestall the expected attack, a large show of force, some 1,400 men all told, the largest military expedition to visit the plains since the days of Coronado, was mustered at Fort Leavenworth and sent west under the command of General Winfield Hancock, like Custer, a hero of the Civil War with no previous experience fighting Indians. Several celebrities, including Wild Bill Hickok, came along, the idea being that wherever Custer went, action was sure to follow. But the expedition was a disaster from the first. Snowmelt and heavy rain turned the normally dry plains into a quagmire. Supply wagons sank to their axles in the mud. The proper drilling of the troops was impossible. By the time Hancock's army reached Fort Larned in western Kansas, it was already April, too late for a winter campaign. Then, on the 9th of April, a freak storm dropped 8 inches of fresh snow on the plains. Despite these conditions, an impatient Hancock sent word to a mixed group of Sioux and Cheyenne encamped on the Pawnee Fork, 40 miles to the west, demanding that their chiefs come to the fort immediately so that peace talks could commence. When the chiefs arrived, exhausted, several days later, Hancock subjected them to a stern harangue. "The Great Father has heard that some Indians have taken white men and women captives," he said. "He has heard also that a great many Indians are trying to get up war. That is the reason I came down here. I'm going to visit you in your camps." To this, Tall Bull replied that the Indians on Pawnee Fork were peaceful, and that the real issue was white settlement, which was causing game on the southern plains to diminish fast. As for Hancock's threat to visit his village, Tall Bull warned, "If you go, I shall have no more to say to you there than here. I am going, however, to your camp tomorrow," Hancock stubbornly repeated. What happened next goes a long way toward explaining why the Army later became so enamored of dawn attacks on quiet, sleeping villages. For while the Indians, fearing another Sand Creek, were forced to evacuate their village with few belongings, and on winter, weakened ponies to boot, they still easily outmarched Custer and the 7th Cavalry. For 3 long days, Custer continued the pursuit, and yet in all that time, not a single Indian was seen, let alone captured or engaged in battle. It was, Custer would later remark, as if all 1,500 of the Indians, men, women, and children, had vanished into thin air. Angry at the failure, Hancock ordered that the entire village be burned to the ground. But first, before the first match was struck, a young reporter named Henry M. Stanley, who would later gain fame by tracking down the Scottish explorer David Livingstone in Africa, took a precise inventory of everything the Indians left behind. Among other items, the inventory included 251 hide lodges, 129 chairs, 942 buffalo robes, 436 saddles, 19 bridles, 148 lariat ropes, 435 travois, 190 kettles, 65 coffee pots, 28 coffee mills, 77 frying pans, 7 ovens, 50 tin cups, 149 horn spoons, 98 water kegs, 212 sacks of paint, 74 stone mallets, 191 axes, 46 hoes, 27 crowbars, 17 hammers. This sounds like the back of your pickup, Dad. 17 hammers, 25